Hello and welcome back to UK Highland Photography here on YouTube, the channel dedicated to helping you to become a better photographer. Today we're going to be talking about some of the stresses it is that us photographers can experience when working on important assignments. So let me give you a working example. Let's say you're a baby photographer, and that means you make money from taking photographs of smiling babies. So let's say that you start your day's work and you take your very first photograph of a smiling baby. No problems there, no stress. But let's say that the next baby you photograph starts to cry. Okay? Now can you see what the problem is? Can you now see what the stress is? Anyway, let's say you got the baby to smile and you got your next baby into photograph. Now what happens if the baby starts crying again? Again, can you see where the stress is? And let's say that this routine is just contagious and every baby that comes in to be photographed is crying. So again, there's a form of stress where baby photographers could experience. Now let's have a look at another working example of where a photographer can feel stress in the workplace. Let's say that you've agreed to photograph a chief executive officer of a certain company. Now let's say that you agreed that you will be on site at 1100 hours in order to photograph the chief executive officer. But now let's say that you have also agreed to photograph a wedding at 1300 hours later on that day. So that means that at 1100 hours you will photograph the chief executive officer, then you will leave at 1200 hours and make your way to the wedding and photograph the wedding at 1300 hours. But that doesn't go to plan, and instead you arrive at the chief executive officer's premises at exactly 1100 hours, and at 11:30 you find out that the chief executive officer's plane was delayed and he's now expected to be at his place of work at 1300 hours. Wow, that must be pretty stressful for a photographer to know, because let's have a look at that again. The chief executive officer is now going to be arriving at his place of work at 1300 hours, but at 1300 hours you've got to be photographing a wedding. So as a photographer, what do? Do you stay and photograph the chief executive officer when he does arrive at 1300 hours, or do you cancel photographing the chief executive officer and just leave and move on to photograph your wedding, which you did promise to shoot at 1300 hours? So as you can see, that's a very stressful situation for a photographer to find themselves in. And again, going back to stress in the workplace with regards to being a photographer, then there's many reasons how stress can be formed for photographers. Let me give you an example. Your memory card could run out of memory and you've got no more memory cards, or your photographic equipment could just fail to work. Example, a flash bulb could break and you don't have a spare flash bulb to replace it. It could be people who's just unwilling to want to work with you, like a crying baby, but it could also apply to adults. So just let me highlight that to you. But let me just say to you people, from my experience with regards to photographing people, then as a photographer, people who know nothing about photography, they expect you to take a perfect photograph of them the very first time you point the camera at them. Let me give you an example. I used to work as a nightclub photographer, and every time I pointed the camera at people or at groups of people, then I expected my photograph to be perfect straight away. If my photograph was not perfect first time round, then I was classed as not being a good photographer. Yes, I know I was caught out by the settings of my camera, but guess what? The people who I was photographing did not care. Because the photograph was not perfect first time round, then I was not a good photographer to them. Don't ask me why people are like this, but they just are. They don't have time for photographers to be messing around, checking to see if they've got enough memory cards or if they've got enough battery power, or they just don't care about these stresses that we can feel as photographer. As photographers, we have to deal with this stress that is thrown at us from assignment to assignment. Anyway guys, as you know, this was just a video to quickly highlight that being a photographer also means you have to deal with stress every now and again. Remember to subscribe to the channel, and if you've not already, then visit our online shop over at www.ukhighland.com.